Today we'll talk about birds.
Is this from simplest to most complex?
It's basically in order of evolution, really. So birds, well, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But so birds, and in birds, what we'll do is talk mainly about some of the adaptations to flight, because obviously it's one of the unique characteristics to birds is that they are able to fly. And so there's a few. Flying is pretty difficult. Requires a whole bunch of different adaptations to make that possible. So we'll talk about some of these. One important thing is, in order to fly, birds need to be fairly light. Okay? They can't be very heavy. Some of the heaviest birds are the ones that have the most difficulty flying. And one of the ways that birds are lighter than they normally would be is because of the structure of their bones. Do you know anything about the bones of birds? You said?
Hollow.
Yeah, they're hollow-ish. Okay, because they're not completely hollow, but they have sort of a network, a web of thin threads of bone that reinforce them, giving them strength, but at the same time allowing them to be pretty light in weight. So they have lightweight, hollow bones with this network of reinforcing bone matter inside. So there are these hollow bones, and you know, when I was in college, I tell you about my college course all the time, but I took a course in ornithology. Ornithology is the study of birds. And one of the things you have to do is hold these birds' skeletons. And for even a large bird, they're much, much lighter than you would think they would be. Like if you had like a mammal of the same size as the bird you're holding, the bird's skeleton would be much, much lighter because of that. It makes a big difference. And you can see in there, this is an actual picture of a bone. You can see that thin network of mostly hollow bone, but they still need to be strong. So, yeah. Birds also, like reptiles, have internal fertilization. So the egg cells are fertilized inside of the female's body. And then, like reptiles, the bird lays the egg, and then it matures and develops outside of the body. So we call that internal fertilization and external development.
In that picture with the hollow, yeah, that one?
Yeah.
Does that mean they like broke its bone?
This one, yeah, this is like it's cut through the middle to see it. So birds have internal fertilization, external development. Birds are warm-blooded. So this is the first group we talked about that are warm-blooded, meaning they maintain a constant body temperature. They have a mechanisms within their body to generate body heat, to release body heat, to keep their bodies at the proper temperature. And like we talked about, it's how is this a benefit? So how is this a beneficial adaptation, Jax?
They can live in colder environments.
Yeah, they can live in a wide variety of temperatures. Birds live in very, very cold environments, think about penguins, or they can live in very hot environments as well, because they regulate their own body heat. What's the downside to being warm-blooded, right?
Like their body temperature doesn't change like where they go, so they have to watch like where they go. So
well, they can live in a wide variety, but it's something else.
They need more like food so they can like produce that body heat.
Yeah, they need much more food than a similar sized cold-blooded organism. They need more food because a lot of the energy that they consume goes into keeping that body temperature at the proper level. They also have a four-chambered heart. And a four-chambered heart is the most efficient type of heart for delivering the maximum amount of oxygen to the body cells. And this is important in birds. Flight is very energy intensive. It takes a lot of energy to maintain those flight muscles and to keep them working properly. And so a four-chambered heart allows oxygenated blood to be kept completely separate from deoxygenated blood. So blood that's low in oxygen gets pumped to the lungs, and then it returns on the other side of the heart, where it then can get pumped to the body. and then returns back to the heart again. So it keeps those types of blood completely separate. What's that? I made a lot of students transferred out of my class after that, parents.
What if Mr. Latino walked by and you were outside?
I'll go greet him and say hello.
Sing you about.
Yeah.
What if he said you got?
What's he gonna say?
What if he
He's
didn't
not gonna
like it?
critique my choice of outfits, is he? I
Oh, kid just walked by.
hope he doesn't walk by.
Is there something different? Did you
You
get
could
up your
have
So, a four-chambered heart allows the maximum amount of oxygen to get to all the cells of the body.
Hey, hold on, go back.
So horse gets
Wait, what was the last word again? Max O2.
maximum oxygen to cells.
Whoa, this bird looks like he's snapping.
All right, so bird eggs have a hard, waterproof shell, different type of shell from reptile eggs. It's made of calcium, but it's more brittle, but it's still waterproof. It's also permeable to gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, so they can get in and be released, which is important in the development of the embryo. And bird eggs need to be incubated. Most reptile eggs, they lay their eggs and then basically leave them. Many bird eggs need to be incubated though, which means they need moisture and heat applied in order for the development to begin and to continue. So, a hen will sit on the eggs. If you ever raised eggs like at home or something to hatch, I never do that, or at school, you never hatch chick eggs. What do you have to have them in? A little incubator. We actually have one down in Mrs. Dowling's storeroom area, a big wooden one, and or they have little desktop ones. But basically, it keeps a constant temperature and humidity that's needed for those eggs to develop. And if they're not at the proper temperature, they don't grow. David?
You said it needed moisture, so
Yep.
where does it get the moisture from? Does it pair with the air?
No, it's just by the guy trapping that air in there. It's moisture air than otherwise.
Ew. After the eggs,
What's that? No, after they're basically ready to be on the run. Many birds migrate. Not all birds, obviously. If you're around, you see birds that stick around. But many birds do migrate. Scientists are not, as far as I know, 100% sure about how birds migrate, about how they find direction. When I was in that ornithology class, our professor told us about some of the experiments. So what are some of the ways you think birds might be able to navigate and return back to the same area, thousands of miles? Victoria?
They can sense like the direction of the wind.
Okay, so temperature. Okay, Nicholas?
I think one day, way back, they tried going one way, they had to go all the way around the earth, so they decided I'm not going to go that way, I'm going to go this way.
Interesting. But how do they find their way back? They migrate, and how do they find their way back to the same exact spot? Trial and error. Michaela? Instincts, but how do they know? They just know? How do they know what direction they're facing?
They just know. They have eyes.
They have eyes, so they use sight.
Yeah.
Some scientists believe they could use the constellations actually to navigate. One of the experiments that scientists have done is put contact lenses on the birds so they couldn't see, and see if they can return back to their place, and they can. What's another method? Matthew?
A magnetic brain.
Yeah, well, magnetism.
Oh,
Some
cool.
people think that birds can sense Earth's magnetic poles and use that to navigate. One of the experiments scientists have done is strap little magnets to sort of throw off their sense of the magnetic field of the Earth and see if they're able to get back. I think the last I knew the scientists currently say is they use a variety of ways, both visual, magnetism, and other ways to navigate back and forth.
So they didn't use
Use them?
These drops that stop in the same exact place every year as well.
Yeah, it's pretty. The same thing like I was talking about the salmon. They somehow find their way back to the exact place that they were born.
I would say they're sent.
Lindsay?
These birds fly like, and they like fly like over the sea, like
Yeah.
all that way, like
Yep.
little tiny little birds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, you like the ones in my backyard?
There's a bird that can.
Yeah, like where do they rest?
What's that?
Like you threw like
Yeah.
where do they rest?
They rest. They just fly. They glide. Or there are various islands they may find and take a break on. Or they probably follow the continents and try to minimize their direct overseas route.
What do they need, like a ton of calories to access?
Yeah, it takes a lot of food and energy. And they often migrate in flocks to make it less energy intensive, that they take turns leading the pack to absorb more of the force of the wind. So there's all sorts of things that they might do.
I was like
David?
watching Animal Planet once, and there was like this article about this bird that like went around the world like 3 times before it actually stopped, laid eggs, and then did it again.
Never heard that one.
Not a very smart bird.
All right, for feathers, birds, feathers are an adaptation they have to flight, obviously. There's different types of feathers birds have. There's contour feathers, down feathers, flight feathers. And these feathers have a variety of purposes. Flight feathers give the bird its aerodynamic shape, give it lift as its wings glide through the air. Down feathers are used for insulation, both for birds, but also if you have a down comforter or a down pillow at your house, a down jacket, it's filled with goose feathers that are used for insulation. And so if you have a pillow or a sleeping bag or whatever like that, sometimes the little feathers come poking out and you pull them out. And they're just this curly little feather, and they trap air close to the bird, which allow it to stay warm.
You know how those North Faces they have like this about to like those feathers sticking?
Oh, do they? Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah, those are down feathers. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's a true down coat, they're synthetic down as well, but true down are actual feathers.
Did you know that some fleeces are made out of recycled plastic?
I didn't know
I
that.
learned that in
Michaela?
class. Do they have to kill the birds to get feathers?
No.
The down feathers, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. That's a good
Yeah, I
question.
watched Dirty Jobs once, and the way they do it is they have this big machine that like spins, and then they just put the grease to it, and it like absorbs all of the feathers, and then that's how they do it.
Oh, interesting.
That's
It just has to get really dizzy. All right, also feathers are used for camouflage. Many birds are camouflaged, and some birds are brightly colored in order to attract mates.
Have you seen a bird that looks like this, and it looks like a goose and stuff?
And I think we talked about this with the peacock and the peafowl, is that often in birds, the males are brightly colored and very showy, whereas females are often more drab in color and more camouflaged. Birds evolved from,
Wait.
chickens are birds, Michaela, from reptiles like dinosaurs, correct? So, one of the most famous bird fossils or bird ancestors, so when scientists are trying to figure out how species have evolved, they often look for intermediate fossils. Fossils that show stages in between 2 different species. And so one of the most famous fossils around is called Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx is a fossil that helped scientists establish that birds did in fact evolve from reptiles. The name itself means ancient bird. And it's about the size of a crow, and it was preserved in very, very fine sediments. And so it was fossilized, but with great detail. So scientists, when they looked at this fossil of Archaeopteryx, they were able to see very, very fine detail, the tiny little structure of the wings and so forth. It gave them a very good view of what this this ancestor of birds probably looked like. That's what it actually looks like. That's the fossil itself. You could see the wings, and if it were shown in more detail, you would see the you could see the feathers of this bird. But what you also would see is that it had claws at the end of its wings. So today modern birds don't have any claws at the end of their wings, but it did. It had a scaly neck and head. It also had a long bony tail. Today's birds do not have a bony tail, but it did have one. So it was a sort of intermediate. It had longer legs. It was between sort of reptiles and birds. It was one of those intermediate fossils. David?
Did they find its head like tilted back?
Yeah, it was. That's the exact position it was in. Bent back there, that long neck. And
So it wouldn't like fly around my head.
no, that was just the position when it died.
I thought it was a double tail.
No, that's its tail, and that's its.
I mean, like me.
That's like our recreation of what it may have looked like when it was living. Again, claws here at the end of the wings, long scaly neck, bony tail, but that's what scientists think it probably looked like. All right, we're going to spend some time talking about eggs. I say eggs, probably most of you say eggs.
What?
I say eggs. Most of you probably say eggs.
Eggs. I don't hear any difference in eggs.
I say
Eggs. All right. Anyway, so when you buy some eggs at the grocery store, those are chicken eggs usually. You can buy duck eggs or other things, quail eggs, but they're chicken eggs. They came from a hen. Are you eating a baby chicken?
No.
We have some. I made my daughter a bagel, egg, and cheese sandwich this morning for breakfast. Aren't they nice? Aren't they nice? Okay. Was that a living bird that I cooked for her? Yeah, you guys.
I was joking.
I like yes. I like
Why? So
Yeah.
why? How do you know? How do they make sure those eggs are not fertilized? That they're not little baby chickens? Because they could be. If David.
I heard one thing that they put this through this like huge machine thing and actually unfertilizes them.
There's no unfertilizing. Yeah, you can't unbake a cake. True. Nicholas.
And make sure no male roosters, no roosters going around.
That's right. If you have just like now in a big factory farm, which probably most of our eggs come from, things are a little different. But if you think, we get our eggs from a woman who has a little farm, and yeah, Linda. We get our eggs from Linda. And anyway, she has like a real hen house, like a old time sort of. And she has hens back there. They lay eggs. She collects them. But in a place like that, you make sure they're not fertilized by keeping the rooster, not having a rooster, which is a male chicken. If you keep the rooster away from the hens, he cannot fertilize any of those eggs. And even if they're not fertilized, hens will still lay eggs, okay, regardless of whether they're fertilized or not. So those eggs that the hens lay, they're not fertilized, and they never could grow into a chick because they weren't. Now, if you wanted to raise some eggs to actually hatch chicks, you would let the rooster in with the hens. You'd probably mate with those hens and fertilize some of the eggs. Then those eggs could be fertile, and they could grow into an actual chick. David?
So like the first human to ever have eggs, do you think he had a fertilized egg?
Probably. And people still eat fertilized eggs. I mean, some people eat fertilized eggs with embryo inside of it as a
That's
food.
scary.
Wait, did he say that?
That people eat eggs with embryos.
A man?
Oh, okay. Then wait.
What do you think? What?
Yes.
I heard there's another way called like candling.
Well, candling is just ensures that it's not fertilized. They basically, if you put an egg, it used to be a candle. They used to hold an egg up to an actual candle, and the bright light allows you to see sort of through that shell and see if you can see the outline of an embryo in there, and they make sure there wasn't one. Today they do it with just very bright lights, but it's the same procedure. They can ensure that they're not fertilized by doing that. Because if somebody gets a fertilized egg in there, they're not going to be there. David, question?
No, not really. I was watching this on Foods, and they were like in China, and he was eating like a rotten egg. Like
A rotten egg? Oh yeah, I've heard of that too. They're like a delicacy. All right, let's do these parts, and tomorrow we'll talk about what they do. So if you look at an unfertilized egg, an egg you have in your kitchen right now, we can talk about the parts. Obviously, we have the shell of an egg. We'll talk tomorrow about what these things do, but we'll just label it for right now. Beneath that shell, that very thin layer, that if you have a hard-boiled egg, you gotta kind of peel it off. That's the shell membrane. It's another layer just beneath the shell. Or if you crack a raw egg and you look inside the shell, there's still the membrane is in there. The yolk, obviously, is the yellow in the middle.
I don't like eggs.
Well, neither do I.
I don't like them like sunny side. I only like
Egg
scrambled.
white is scientifically named albumin. No. The yolk membrane surrounds the yellow yolk, and if you're trying to make like eggs over easy, you want to try not to rupture that yolk membrane, otherwise the yolk spills all
Wait,
over.
so when you get like
So when you're having your egg sunny side up and then you dunk your toast in it, and then the yolk oozes all over, you're rupturing the yolk membrane.
I don't really stab. That's what I do. I stab it with a fork and then it's raw.
Wow, violent.
I don't like this. I just kind of
If you ever cracked a raw egg and you see some little white things attached to the yolk, they're called chalazi. They are these little rope-like structures. They're here and here.
What do they do?
We'll talk about it tomorrow. And build up the tension. You've been wondering about this all night long. Like, I really wonder what those chalazi do. But you have to wait till tomorrow to find
we
out.
can look it up tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna make mine.
The top, at the larger end of the egg, is an air space, a little gap.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
No problem. And then on the yolk, you may find a tiny little white spot. That's called the blastoderm.
Doesn't blast
Wait,
up.
where is that?
No.
Wait, no, what's the time? No.
I don't think it's time.
Oh, no, we're not doing it.
Then you get.
Yes, Matthew?
Why do one day in the year you're allowed to get egg for straight up? Why is that?
It's not true, I don't believe.
Like,
Wait, no.